playing cops and robbers who can't tell anyone.
I don't know. If we told you that, then we'd kind of give it away. So,
Infiltrate.
Yeah.
All right. So, I guess the first question is the 300-pound gorilla in the room. You're here. Again,
I'm here.
And the chief is not. So, where do we stand on that situation?
There's no news to report on that. The chief is currently on a voluntary leave at this time.
And it's been extended?
No, there was never. It's just. It is what it is. There was. Nothing in particular as far as an end date, and that's really all the information I have on that.
Well, this is the second time now. Who's doing the investigation?
That's not something I can get into. There's not something that's being handled internally, so...
It's not internally, though?
Correct.
Okay. So as with any cases of firearms being used or anything, there's always outside agencies that are brought in for most part.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's a good thing to note. Any type of officer-involved shooting in the public or anything like that always involves an outside agency. Typically, Department of Criminal Investigation has really gotten good at handling those. So
that's a state agency.
Yep.
So they then would take somebody from other departments. It's not always held, although the state agency is in charge of that, it's not always them who handle the investigation. They may bring in other departments, from what I've understood.
Yeah, that would be up to them. The Department of Justice has gotten really fluid in doing that. I know there's a lot of agencies that rely on them just because they're that 1,000-foot umbrella over the state, so they've gotten quite good at it, and they're really a valuable resource for us. So that's where we would turn if we had some sort of an officer-involved shooting.
So no news on the chief for the return, huh?
Correct.
Okay, I had to ask. People are asking because it's been a couple of times now, and I don't know if... I won't cast any aspersions as to how that reflects, but people draw their own conclusions.
They do, and the only thing that I could offer is that we are running smooth. We're getting the work done. We're still going to get the job done. We're still going to be in the community. We're going to carry on just like when Rick was here, and that's our mission. So, people can feel confident that we're going to maintain status quo. We're still going to maintain the level of professionalism, and we'll be there when you need us. So,
you know what that means, don't you? The obvious is that, like I used to talk about 30 years ago, we had an efficiency expert come in. Mm-hmm. That usually meant somebody was going to lose a job, and the rest of us were going to pick it up. If we can operate so well without them, why don't we? Is the question that's obvious.
Well, all I can really say to that is that every position in our department is vital. And just because I say that we're operating smoothly doesn't mean that we don't need that position. We certainly do. There needs to be a head of the agency in place, and I make no inferences as far as a time frame or what's going on with the chief right now. We'll just have to let that process play out.
If you're just tuning in and you don't understand here, maybe I started ahead of the rest of the view. The police chief of Marshfield, Rick Grams, is on a voluntary leave and has been now for the second time in less than a year. And I don't, as you just heard, have any information as to why or when he will come back or what's going on here with that. But it's my duty to ask, I guess, and find out that, as he would say when he's here, no comment. I said, you can't say that. He said, I just did.
Yeah.
So talking with Deputy Chief Pat Zepps here and Lieutenant Travis Esser, this time of the year, school is in session in a whole different way. There's people spread out in different places. I guess for the most part, just less of them. How are you handling crossing guards and patrol and of that?
I think we're handling it very well. You're right. The high schoolers are attending 1 day a week, and I think there's going to go to a rotation to where they may fall to some students end up going twice a week, just by how the schedule falls. But we've got our crossing guards out there. As everybody knows, the elementary schools are in full swing. They're going 5 days a week. From everything that I've understood or been told, it's going very smooth.
Well, you would think with basically half the population of what we would normally have out there, or even less, there would be less problems just by virtue of numbers. But
I know and maybe Travis can talk to the police school liaison, or school resource officer now, that's what we call him. side of it, but my understanding is that it feels like somewhat of a ghost town at the high school with, a quarter of the kids there. But how's that going up there, Travis?
Yeah, that's basically the way it was described to me by our school resource officer, Matt Barris. I just talked to him about that yesterday, and he said it's definitely a different feel with a lot less bodies and noise, movement around in the hallways and things going on there. But he's still getting, cases to handle there as well, even though there's not as many kids in school. But we're going to both of our school resource officers there for the safety of the school and the students that are there, and we want that to continue to go well like it has been, and continue to build those relationships with our department really, and officers in general with the students of the city as well. So
if my next question would be, if there aren't any kids there, why spend the resources to continue to do that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They still are receiving complaints that they need to handle within the school, and they might be to a lesser degree. But again, I think the value of having a visible officer in those schools is a preventative measure to a degree for us, and to show that we are there, we're present, and to thwart off any ideas of coming to the school to cause any harm or anything like that. And then probably bigger than that, like I said before, is just the continuation of the relationship between the school and police. And we want to do the best that we can, because I know I have myself not been a school resource officer, but those that have been working with them, and they'll have students come up to them 10, 15 years later from the time that they had been in the middle school or the high school, and walk right up to that officer and say hi, and that relationship lasts a very long time. And those are our future citizens, and like we've talked before on this program about, our success as a police department is definitely dependent upon our relationship with the community, and a lot of that starts there in the schools.
Marshfield Police Lieutenant Travis Esser here talking with me on the Insight program this second Friday in September. It's one of those things where I wonder why, if you're only having a minute number of kids any given time, but then, God forbid, something would happen, everybody'd say, why weren't you there? So, it's devil if you do and darned if you don't, I guess.
Yeah, we tend to try to take, at least personally, I try to take the path more easily defended. And it certainly is having that school resource officer there. I think Travis touched on it, the relationship building that takes place with the kids, and creating that bridge between the department and the community. And I know it kind of sounds like a standard answer, but it really is invaluable. It's just great to have that relationship. So,
well, when you see what comes to you and only experience it through the media, that's, people say, how do we get here in society? I said, well, that's it. We don't consider ourselves rural as a city, but we are. And the world comes to us from, the world, not just our country, but the world comes to us through our TV. And jaded by the comments of the people who are doing it, it can be education that might be false. You got to find your own world.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges. We all have the world at our fingertips now on our cell phones, and really when you get out there and look, you can find whatever narrative or research that supports the position you want to take. And I guess the best advice I could give people is be open-minded, and I know they've heard that from other public officials, some maybe not so much. Be open-minded, and I think one of the harder things is to be patient and let some of these processes play out, and that's where people come to those conclusions. So that would be the really advice I can give you, is be wary of what you're reading, do your research, learn, make the best decision you can.
Well, I guess we're kind of wandering over into the social media side of this here, and the story that I was given here is that you are investigating a social media post regarding a young lady in Marshfield who felt that she was followed on Tuesday, and looking into that kind of concern. So did it come to you through social media?
My understanding that it was not directly sent to us, but somebody saw that post on social media and forwarded it to us. So one of the challenges we have is that now we've got what could be a potentially serious complaint that wasn't technically complained to us. So we have an ethical and moral responsibility to look into that, and that's what we did. So we started trying to trace that post back and make contact with the individual who did put it out there, which my understanding is that's ongoing to try to determine the validity of it. And I guess the best advice, and we did throw something out on Facebook on this, by all means, if something like that happens, call. I know that people have an inclination to turn to social media now and put those things out there. But it really can be beneficial for us in the short term to get that information right away, to try and vet that before it spreads when we really don't even know what the circumstances behind it were. So my request would be to give us a call right away if something doesn't seem right. We'll talk through that and decide where we go from there.
Well, talking with Deputy Chief Pat Zepps here on the Insight program today, you can too, 384-2192, 384-2192 on this second Friday of the month. You're in that unenviable position, which is now probably amplified, of do you or don't you take stuff seriously. And today, you almost cannot not take it seriously. You have to follow through. But now you have this media out there, social media, that where the Mrs. Kravitz of the world who are looking through their blinds can suddenly become valid complaints when nobody actually filed a complaint with you.
Right. And again, that's the struggle, is that people will come to judgment before we've had a chance to really even look into anything. So when something like that goes on, it's really, really important that we get that initial information, because in some respects we can cause kind of a panic if we put something like that out there, whereas the community needs to remember we're that resource that can determine, well, was this a serious threat? We can act on that. Or was this a misunderstanding? One of the last articles I'd seen out of the event that they had in Greenwood was that might be a potential misunderstanding. They didn't go into any great detail on that. I just saw that news article. If that is a misunderstanding, the benefit there is that they called those police officers right away. They were able to determine that fairly quickly, even though that still spread and may have prompted some other calls. So
it's hard. It's got to be hard for you not to involve yourself in the discussion. But when it comes with your name on it, people believe it as fact. But you're getting involved in a discussion here where nothing yet really happened. And you get people involved in the investigation by virtual talking about things. And, sometimes the eyes are good. You want people out there helping you. But on the other hand, you're just involving yourself and engaging in a conversation that really doesn't have fact to it yet.
Right,
and that's what Pat hit on. I think it's important that, we have a duty to investigate that as soon as we learn about it to the best of our abilities, but it is so much more beneficial to us on the patrol side to get a phone call about something like that, because we don't have the resources to monitor social media 24/7. I think our Facebook page gets monitored pretty well, but we can do a lot more with immediate information than we can with that delayed information that we get third or fourth hand, and then we have to backtrack and try to find some stuff, which obviously we want to do and we will do to the best of our abilities, but it's so much more valuable if it comes in right away.
Hi, speaking of the Facebook page, I saw a post of release of sexual offenders in the area. Is that, I think about, how did we do that before? Or did we let people know that people were coming back into the civilian population that had been convicted of such things? And I don't know if they forfeited any of their civil rights by becoming judged guilty. To come back in. I mean, when do you get done serving your penalty here? When you got an S on your back that you're the convicted one?
Yeah, that depends on the level of offense. And with a lot of those sexual offenses, most of them are going to end you up on the sexual offender registry, in many cases for life. So, however you interpret that, I mean, years ago, obviously technology has changed so much, and we rely on the Department of Justice on how we get that information out there. Facebook is a really, really valuable way to get that information out there. Years past, we would go knocking on doors with a flyer. And so even when you did that, you were limiting your exposure to a very small area. You might also do a news release, and it was dependent on how those news outlets ran it. So our reach with Facebook is really helpful, and it does invite some conversation. And so according to the DOJ, that's really the most effective way to get that out there. When
an offender, and I call them an offender because they were judged guilty and they did their time, is now back in the community, and you going around and giving people flyers and warning them that they're back in. Yep. I mean, when does their... I don't know. I'm torn between they served their time, or are we, being super cautious now, or is it if they were deemed by the psychologist to be a possible reoffender again, would they let them go? I don't know.
It's a great question. I think one of the things to point out when it comes to that is that those decisions are made on the Department of Justice side. They've got a sexual offender registry department that tracks and monitors those people. And even when they come out of the criminal justice system or out of the prison system, if that's where they end up, the decisions on where they go, how long they're there, really do fall on the Department of Justice, Probation and Parole, and the Sex Offender Registry. So most of those decisions are really out of law enforcement's hands. And so when we put something like that out there, we do garner a lot of comments as far as how do you let this happen? Well, whether you think it should happen or not, that decision's not really rests in the hands of the police department.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the society that we live in, or, it's good that and it's, when is a penalty paid?
Right.
I mean, it's different, though, with those kind of crimes than petty theft.
Well, and I think you really touch on a good point there, because the thing to remember is that there are certain kinds of crimes that when you commit them, they're going to follow you the rest of your life, and that's one of them. So as far as when is that lifted, that may never be lifted, and those types of offenders probably should never be lifted off of them, because it's just that type of crime and the victimization that it causes. When you decide to commit that type of crime, you're taking that with it. It's coming.
That's a personal offense as opposed to a property. And that can hang with you for a long time. Yep. Talking with Marshfield PD this second Friday of the month of September. You know that if you're listening live here on WDLB, or you could be watching us on video sometime in the future here. Channel 989 on your Spectrum is the Marshfield City channel. We'll be rotating throughout the month until our next program in October, or you could be watching us at Marshfield Media Access or their Facebook page for that matter. So just want to let you know that some of the things we talk about here have already kind of been resolved by the time you may be watching this. But as I say, if you're listening live here, we're talking about the opportunity to call in and talk to members of the Marshfield PD. And this story, I want to circle back to... It started out as a social media post of a young lady who thought she was followed, and I wonder how much time and seriousness you put into these. If you didn't, they'd come back to you and say, well, why didn't you? And then when you do, you're taking resources and spending time on what could be dust in the air. How do you know when to go and when not to go?
I think on that serious of a potential incident, we're going to, err on the side of caution there and definitely look into that to the greatest degree that we can. And again, like I said before, it would be easier for us, or we might have a better chance of locating that suspect if that comes through a telephone call instead of a Facebook post. But in today's world, everybody knows everybody else, it seems like, on Facebook, and so I don't know the exact time frame that it took from that posting before it got to us, but I don't think it was very long. I mean, we have I know for a fact that one of the officers' wives had saw it on Facebook and forwarded it to one of our officers, and so it didn't take long at all before we were able to see that and then start that follow-up investigation with the person who made the post and track down as much information on that as we can. And that's currently still being worked on, to my knowledge, so we're still investigating that to the best that we can.
But when you say Facebook, I think to myself, how far we've fallen or how far we've come. I don't know which way to look at that, because as social media and the actual police, works, there's the old look out for a guy under your car with a box cutter in the Walmart parking lot because he's going to cut your Achilles tendon and try to take you. Or you get these tales that just circulate. And you think to yourself, is there any validity to this? Should I even bother with any kind of... And then there are those people who are highly acute and they wonder why you didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, it's always a balancing act, and that's law enforcement in general, for us to kind of vet through some of those things. And yeah, they're coming in lots of different ways now through social media outlets and not what we're accustomed to from years past of direct complainants. We recently had a incident actually of it's still being investigated, but we believe a swatting incident where somebody called and provided some false information that we're currently looking into as well. And so there's technology being used, obviously, in ways to prevent us from tracking the original source of that information, but we're doing our best to be ahead of that and still figure out who's responsible for those things, and using technology in a good way to figure those things out. And then, in the moment, obviously, our officers sometimes have to decide, is this valid or not valid? And we're always going to err on that side for the safety of citizens to treat it as valid until we can determine that it's not.
Well, the oldest trick in the book for John Dillinger was call the cops and tell them there's something happening on the other end of town while I robbed a bank on this end of town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much more technological now, and different scams are getting so much more technical in the way that they do it. But describe swatting. I don't know that everybody's up to speed on that.
Yeah, and I actually just recently learned even that within, I think, this past year, Wisconsin came out with a statute specific to that, and it's actually called swatting. A lot of times they'll come up with a different name for it, but it's actually called that. It's in Chapter 947, and basically what that involves is a person calling in some sort of complaint that would prompt or would likely prompt, and I'm paraphrasing here obviously, but it would either prompt or likely prompt the response of some sort of specialized response team. So you think of like a SWAT team. And so it's generally a pretty serious incident that would require additional personnel for a department to send out with additional weaponry and tactics and things like that. And the state government has obviously recognized that that's a pretty big deal when somebody does something like that, and we're gearing up additional officers and having whatever threat it is be at that level of severity that causes us to have to respond in that way. And they've now made that into a statute where if somebody does that, they can be held responsible for it. And I think it's a Class I felony.
I mean, in your experience, whether it's with the department or just in general what you read in the industry, is that somebody who's, two drunk guys get together and this will be a hoot? Or is it somebody who found somebody with somebody else's wife and they want to sig the cops on them, or just make an incident out of nothing in order to get even or something?
Some of it is an incident out of nothing. And when you look, a lot of those cases are by people who are in different parts of the country. So that's how scary it is, and they don't understand how scary it is. Imagine being in your house and all of a sudden a SWAT team or a very heavy police response arrives at your doorstep for some sort of a call that now we have to vet to make sure that it's not true or it is true, and you have no idea why we're there. It just really creates a dangerous situation for everybody involved, and it kind of goes back to that discussion on technology and how easy it is for people to do some of those things. I'm personally really glad that they made that into a statute, because I know there have been incidences that have resulted in even deaths across the country from swatting calls. I don't know if it was Wichita. Kansas had one, but a call called in from someone in California. It's a really, really bad scenario that some people probably look at as a lighthearted joke, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, when you show up with the ARs and click the safety off, the fun just left.
It did, on both sides. I mean,
talking with Assistant Deputy Chief Pat Zepps and Lieutenant Travis Esser here on the Marshfield Police Department Day, the second Friday in the month of September, on today's Insight program.
Race fans, this Friday and Saturday night is the Fall Shootout weekend of racing. 2 nights of racing, 11 feature events. Friday night is highlighted by the Super Late Models, and Saturday the Midwest Truck Series invades Marshfield Motor Speedway. In all, 9 great divisions of racing will be taking part. Admission both nights is $12 for adults, $8 for students. Kids 8 and under are free. Friday night qualifying at 6:30 with racing at 7:30. Saturday qualifying is at 4 p.m. with racing at 5. It's the Fall Shootout weekend of racing this Friday and Saturday night at Marshfield Motor Speedway. Be there!
I'm Captain Ann Maxon with the Wisconsin State Patrol. Safety on our highways is a team effort. Every day, our troopers and inspectors focus on keeping people and commerce moving safely. Drivers can do their part to prevent crashes and needless tragedies by remembering 2 simple things. Buckle up, phones down. Thanks for helping us move towards 0 deaths on Wisconsin roads.
A safety message sponsored by the U.S. and Wisconsin DOTs.
AM 1450 WDLB's Insight program this second Friday in September. You know that if you're listening live. You could be watching us, though, on video at marshfieldmediaaccess.org, or you could be watching the Facebook page, or you could be seeing us on Spectrum to 989. We rotate throughout the month with the Insight program here and the guests every Friday throughout the month, unless there's a fifth Friday, and then we'll try to find another city or county or official somewhere along the line here that we can talk to, and even thought about bringing in like Scott Parks or something, because we're across the street from Marathon County, so it's not like it's a big leap here. Part of our listenership. Matter of fact, our tower sits in Marathon County, so it's interesting to talk to him, native of Marshfield, as well. Today, talking about a few things that are going on in the 9/11 day today, as we record this program here for video, and the response, the world in your industry, if I want to call it law enforcement industry, has changed dramatically from previous to that. Our responses, some of them were knee-jerk, some of them were necessary over the years in order to address what we thought could never happen. Something on that scale, of course, but the way the response happened, the firefighters that died, the police communication, what happened with us and the FCC, and how everything allocated spectrum part of the band of communication and changed that. It's why we have HD TV. People don't understand that, but they don't have to. It's just a matter of we threw out all our analog TVs, and now we've got digital TV because of 9/11. And whether or not it was, to me, an overreaction or not, when it happens, as with you, when is an overreaction and when is a proper reaction? What's a proper response to the whole thing? I mean, you've got armored vehicle now that probably was in part due to the fact that we are where we are here, and we don't know. It's a different world than what it was before that. We just never thought that could happen. Our modern day Pearl Harbor, so to speak.
Yeah, and then Travis and I have been around for quite a while. I've been around for going on 23 years, and when I look at things like that armored vehicle, and I know that there's some differing opinions on that, the best way that I can describe that in all my years here is that it's like a big armored shield. And when I look at incidences where that is truly designed to save lives, that's our purpose with that vehicle, to get in between somebody and potentially somebody shooting at them. So that's my take on the armored rescue vehicle. Boy, it has changed in 23 years, that's for sure. I think everything changes, but even how we're outfitted has changed. And some people will look at that as why do you need a tank at Marshfield? Well, my response to that is, well, let's take a look at really what this thing is and what it's for. And it's a tool in our arsenal that I think we would be remiss if we didn't have, given the availability of it, because we can get people to and from a place safely. We can extract people safely. We can get that in between somebody who's in trouble. So it has changed a lot. Departments obviously have a responsibility and a use, and across the country you may have seen some instances where a response to something might have been too much. That really falls on the department to understand how and when to use those tools and make sure that they're used responsibly. But it certainly has changed in my time.
How about your take on the matter?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything in terms of the armored rescue vehicle, but I was going to add in hearing what you said about 9/11 and how things have changed. I think that one of the things I recognize as obviously a positive is that we've locally here, and I'm sure it's happened across the country, is we've really understood that we need to rely on people outside of our agencies as well. So what I mean by that is, like, we've seen a major increase in training with other entities. So, we train with a number of the area sheriff's departments, and we train with a number of the area police departments, and we train with their SWAT teams, and our negotiator teams train together. Our radios have become more interoperable since then, to the degree where we don't, have what they had in New York, where they had a lot of issues with communication. So our portable radios, our squad radios, all of those things have been set up for cooperation with multiple agencies, and we've practiced, and even with our fire department, we've spent a significant amount more time and money in training together for incidents, whereas that wasn't as popular. It's not that it didn't happen before, but it needed that shove to get going in that direction, and it took something like 9/11 to kind of start forcing that to occur, and it's been a really good thing.
What people don't understand is how much of the economy was driven by the changes. I mean, when you think of TV being moved, and now you either had to have a box for your analog TV or you had to get a digital TV, the commerce that was produced from the electronic companies and from the stores and from over the years now that we've had, and even in your law enforcement business, the radios and the communications has all been, there's an industry there that has definitely benefited from these new communication ways and rules and things like that that's available in your squads and on your person, not to mention the videoing that's going on. There's a whole industry that's been made just to keep the videos stored, and body cams and all of that go along with that. But that is in itself part of something that we never really think about here, and the amount of commerce. I don't know that anybody could actually do a study on that as to how many electronics, whether it's for police radios or digital TVs or whatever, has changed since 9/11 and was produced from that in order to be communicating adequately.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've had the pleasure of going to a few conferences on the national level, and one of the things that those conferences provide is a relatively huge showroom of vendors. So as you walk through there, it is so challenging in our profession to stay ahead of that. We had a first go-around with a brand name of body camera that didn't work out so well with us. Had a lot of problems. We had limited storage. We filled that storage up really quickly. Very soon we realized that that product wasn't working. We ended up getting a refund for that, and now we've gone to a different product with an unlimited cloud storage, because there's a responsibility across the profession to maintain that evidence. And I think it's getting harder for departments to defend why they don't have body cameras, and I'll tell you, 99% of it stems from budgetary reasons. I read something similar to that in Kenosha, that it was due to budgetary reasons that they didn't have that. Now, can't say that that's factual or not, but that's something I read, and I'm really thankful that we got ahead of that curve in getting these devices on us, because in the time we've had them, and I don't know if Travis has a different opinion, I have not seen a negative come from these. It's all positive from body cameras.
Well, the only thing is that when there is an incident, I don't know if it's George Floyd or whatever, on that level, it's like, wait a minute, you only saw a part of it because you're seeing a cell phone video. You didn't see what was released, because you can't yet until the DOJ gets their say and says, okay, now we can let this go.
And I guess that is a point that now we end up doing damage control, and so one could look at that as a drawback of the body camera. How I've looked at is that, let's say hypothetically there weren't cameras there. Now are things happening that we should know about, because I've always subscribed to the philosophy that if things are happening and police officers are doing things they shouldn't be doing, that body camera needs to be there. We'll mediate through, the rushes to judgment if those happen, and I'm not saying that happened in the George Floyd incident, but there are instances, like you say, where a small snippet of video and the country's already decided what occurred there. Well, relatively, it takes months for some of these things to play out. So in a respect, that's a negative, but the positive far outweighs that, because we're catching things, and maybe even catching bad officers that may not have been caught. So that's something we have to mediate through. One of the biggest topics is when departments release those videos and how soon after an event. So those are some of the things that you could look at as drawbacks, but I look at them more as hurdles to the overall good. So I'll take the body camera video, and I don't know, how that'll happen, play out up in Minneapolis, but I'm glad that there was body camera video there.
Yeah, and as they say, wait until you see how it got to what you picked up.
Right.
The blowback from people always amazes me. when you're talking to somebody, the first thing I do is shut up. Unless you directly...
Can we quote that?
Yes, unless you ask me a question, I'll just be over here.
Yep.
And hope to God I can sneak away in the darkness before you kind of realize I'm gone.
Yep.
I don't need to be having you, agitated at me for any reason.
Yeah, and honestly, that, another interesting point about that is it really, and I really can't say that this is good, bad, or indifferent, the fact of the cell phone videos really puts the department in a position to have to respond to that. So now you're almost moving a department in a direction that they may not have gone, because you've got to answer to, what you described as that small bit of video that's taken by a cell phone and really is a small piece of the overall incident. So really, departments are put in a position to have to react to that. Now, they probably have much more information if those body cameras were being used correctly. So there is some hurdles there as far as how they react to the cell phone video. The other problem with that is that departments can't control where that cell phone video goes, and so hence we have those things out there, and there's rushes to judgment on that, and that's problematic for departments.
Talking with Deputy Chief Pat Zepps and Lieutenant Travis Esser here of Marshfield PD on this second Friday in the month, as they are in to talk with you too. 384-2192 on the Inside program, 384-2192. And we're talking about just things in general coming up this time of the year. Halloween. We went through a conversation here about how the world has changed. When I think of when I was a kid, it was such an innocent time. We never thought about pedophiles. Not that they didn't exist. You just, everybody knew, George down the street, you stayed away from him, or my dad would go, slap him around a little bit and say, don't be doing that, I mean, it was a different world than we live in now. You can't be doing that anymore. So Halloween is, in some ways, over the years, become a scary tradition, and we've adapted it to where we have trunk and treats and people on the streets. And I mean, how are we going to, have you thought about anything about how we're going to handle that this fall?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's one that's been posed here in the last couple of weeks. And on the side of the police department, what we're really going to do is leave that kind of up to city leadership, because, and again, this is my opinion, you're not talking about a federal holiday here to where we would be able to restrict somebody who wants to hand out candy, or restrict somebody who wants to have their child dress up in a costume and go get that candy. So I don't know how the city will proceed with that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the downtown trick-or-treating, because like you said, that's become a really popular event, and it's a controlled environment, and I think that's why it is popular. So I really don't have any information on what's going to come out on the city side as far as trick-or-treating or where that'll come from, but from the police department standpoint, we'll see what that decision is and see where we go.
Well, you've got a health policy here that was never to be considered before, and that wear a mask under your mask. I mean, where do we stay healthy here? Is it really prudent to be having people in proximity to other people without any, especially kids, and candy, and handed it to them? And does it cause problems, or will there be a shutdown of Halloween like everything else? We didn't have Hub City Days, we didn't have a fair, we didn't have Dairy Fest. I mean, now why you're going to send your kids up and around to people's houses,
right? And
in mass, kids like 5th Street, and where you'd actually block off a part of town here, it's become so popular.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to do that or not, or what will come out of that.
Yeah, and again, I'm perfectly honest that I really don't know the answer to that right now. Those things that you're talking about as far as Hub City Days, June Dairy Days, there was a facilitator, being the city or Main Street Marshfield, who ultimately had the decision to move forward with those or not, similar to the fair. When you look at a holiday like Halloween, that really doesn't fall in anybody's span of control to cancel. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. Again, I don't know to what level city government will pick that up or render an opinion on that, and I guess we'll just have to see where that goes. So that could be an interesting topic coming forward.
Well, the sooner we find out, the sooner we can make alternative plans.
Right.
If on-street trick-or-treating is going to be deemed illegal, then what are we going to do instead? The trunk-or-treats, the gymnasium somewhere, we can plan, a month out ahead of time what to do, but we need a decision here on what's going to be allowed and what's not.
Yeah, and I think for everything, every organized event, one could make the argument that that's not any real safer than being outside, walking at some distance and knocking on a door. I mean, I think it's all relative to your opinion, and I think it's a great question. I wish I had better definitive answers on that. But right now, I think we're just going to have to see where that goes.
Well, your part in it would be to enforce whatever comes down from the people who make the rules, so to speak.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point, because barring some sort of a law or a city ordinance, are we talking about a recommendation from, the CDC or the Wood County Health Department? And wherein does our authority lie to enforce that? And that's been throughout this whole COVID pandemic, is one of the biggest questions, is where does law enforcement fit as far as the enforcement of an executive order versus a statute versus an ordinance of some type. So that's a really interesting question, because from where I sit, I don't know that there's any authority for me to go and restrict what we described earlier as far as somebody who wants to hand out candy. I mean, for the police department to knock on the door and issue some sort of a citation, there's going to have to be some law or ordinance backing that up. I don't know that would happen or could happen in this amount of time, and I'm not saying that it should happen. So, there's so many different opinions on this, and everybody's got such a personal investment in, what they think of the pandemic. So that could be a challenge coming forward.
Talking with Marshfield PD here on today's Inside program. You can too, 384-2192, 384-2192 on this second Friday of the month.
It's time for some straight talk. Here's a wireless equation to wrap your brain around. Big carriers plus fancy phone offers plus pricey contracts equals fail. Switch to Straight Talk Wireless and get a new phone payment plan with no fees, no contracts, and no deposits for great Samsung phones starting at less than $7 a month. All on America's largest and most dependable networks for up to 50% less. Turn that brain power into money-saving power. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but thought it would be too difficult? Then try Babbel. Babbel starts by teaching you words and phrases that gradually get more complex. Soon, you're practicing short conversations. So in 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking a new language in a few weeks. Babbel is built around real life. It teaches you practical conversations that you will actually use. Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a language today. That's BABBEL.com.
Back with you here on today's Inside program, the second Friday of the month of September. You know that if you're listening live. Otherwise, you may be watching us on video, channel 989 on your Spectrum Digital tier, the city channel. We rotate Inside programs throughout the month of various sorts, from the mayor to the county board to the Wood County Sheriff, which, as I said, maybe in the fifth, when I come up with the fifth Friday, I can do the Marathon County Sheriff, because he's just as close as the other guy is. We happen to be across the street. How does that, I never thought to ask you, how does that play into your jurisdiction? It's in the city, right?
Right, so we just cover all city boundaries. So the way that it plays in for us is we have to make the determination, and it's fairly easy to know where a crime occurred is what matters most. And so anything that we deal with at Walmart is in Marathon County. So we know that if we write a ticket to somebody there for retail theft, or if we make an arrest there, all of that, well, I shouldn't say a ticket, a criminal arrest has to go to Marathon County Circuit Court when we make arrests in their county, instead of to Wisconsin Rapids at Wood County Circuit Court. If we issue ordinance citations, like a retail theft ordinance citation in Marathon County, that's still going through our municipal court. So we have that luxury of having our own municipal court that handles all of our ordinance violations. And so it really doesn't matter. We have to check a few different boxes on a citation, but it really doesn't matter in terms of citations. They're all going to go through that municipal court, whether it's in Wood County or Marathon County.
I don't know how you quantify this. I was going to say, how much time do you spend going to Marathon County Court driving up to Wausau to testify on something that happened across the street or involvement in that?
Not a lot, because not a lot of our city boundaries fall within Marathon County, so we're not up there very often. I would say a couple, 3 times a month or something like that. That one of our officers would drive up there to testify in court. Not nearly as much as we would drive to Wood County, but a lot of our, in the last year and a half or so, a lot of our preliminary hearings they've allowed us to do on the Wood County side through video conference calling, and so we're able to do that from our police department now, and that cuts down a ton on the amount that we've been driving back and forth to.
I never thought
Rapids.
Zoom court.
Yeah, right.
All the other things we've got
Right.
along with school, now we got
Right.
Zoom court.
Yeah, right.
Hey, we save a lot in gas that way.
Yeah,
that's
do.
true. I guess it's as legal as, I don't know that there would be any worthwhile for someone to hack in and change video. You know what I'm saying? Like a Mission Impossible or some CSI where somebody hacks in.
I don't think you should plant that seed out there.
I don't know how to do it, and I don't know.
Somebody listens, hey, that might be kind of fun.
Right.
I can imagine, though, but that they brought up that there were some people who did bomb it, photobomb it or something along that line. But I can't imagine that other than that, there would be much interest in doing anything like that. Talking with the Marshfield PD today, Deputy Chief Pat Zepps and Lieutenant Travis Esser in here to talk with you, 384-2192. Well, looks like we've got a taker. Let's go to the phone. Gary, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to present a comment and a question at the same time, and really it has to do more with the county than with the city. But what it is that if I call the county and I have a 384 prefix, they have, of course, caller ID. So I might try and call Marathon County. Let me see if I get this right here. If I try to call Marathon County and I have a 384 prefix, they can jam me and route me to Wood County and not let me even contact Marathon County because maybe I haven't something to say that just pertains to one or the other. I don't know if you can even follow this. It's kind of complicated, but what I sense is that there's some individual down there in Rapids that sees that 384 that's not going to let me call Marathon County, that instead feels I should be dealing with Wood County, and therefore I end up with Wood County. Do you have any comment? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think I've heard of situations where, and I don't know if you're specifically talking about calling 911 or calling the non-emergency. Clarify that. Because if you call 911, sometimes phones do get routed to the wrong county on occasion, and I'm not technically savvy enough to know exactly why that happens or how it exactly happens. But if you call a non-emergency number to either of those dispatch centers, most of the time you have to prompt, you're prompted to hit number 1 or something like that to enter a complaint or talk to a dispatcher. A live dispatcher is going to work through that call with you and figure out which jurisdiction that complaint resides in, and then they may or may not forward you to that other jurisdiction based off of whatever it is that you're providing for information. So that should happen through a live person making that decision. Unless it's 911, sometimes those, for whatever reason, get sent to the wrong tower or however it happens, and they end up in the wrong jurisdiction. And then hopefully that still results in a live person conversation where they can forward you back to the right jurisdiction, if that answers your question.
He's gone. So we're just talking. That jurisdiction thing, I used to laugh when Tom Reichert would come in. I'd say, I'm going to stand across the street and thumb my nose at you. Yeah, can't get me over here. Well, yeah, we're in the same city here. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of boundaries and a lot of things that technicalities, whether it be with equipment or whether it be with people understanding how to route these things, I mean, potentially could be a problem. But for the most part, we haven't had much of that.
No, and I don't think I think exactly what Travis said is right. The key is try to talk to somebody. If you do make a 911 call, like he said, they'll either a lot of times they may forward you, but a lot of times they may take your information, then contact the appropriate dispatch center, be it Wood or Marathon, to have them dispatch officers rather than rerouting you and having you re-explain it. So I have seen that over my career happen plenty of times. The goal is to get the people where they need to be, the officers, as quick as they can. So dispatchers are pretty good at that. Like Travis said, make sure you talk to somebody and explain, and they'll get you where you need to be.
Deputy Chief Pat Zepps, Lieutenant Travis Esser in here on this second Friday of the month of September, talking with Marshfield PD today. In closing, there's an event as we speak here. I bring it up, and it's going to be over with by the time most of you see this, and you'll know what it already has been or maybe have been there. Tonight there is a independent, I guess you call it, celebration gathering called Back the Badge that will take place at Columbia Park. And just to be clear, you have nothing to do with that?
Well, I mean, we'll be in the area just like we would any other event. But as far as any type of technical involvement, no, we don't have that.
So it's not organized by you, or? Correct.
Yep. This is organized by an outside party who really wants to honor the victims of 9/11. And so they rented Columbia Park, and I'm not sure what kind of a response they've gotten, but sounds like it'll be a good event, and we'll be in the area as needed, and we'll be around.
Are you planning on having, or have you asked any of the officers to be there, off duty or any kind?
No, what we'll do is we'll approach that like any other event. As officers have time, they may stop down, take a walk down there, and just have a presence. But we'll see how we're doing on the call side, and if officers have time to do that, we've encouraged them to do that.
So it's a Back the Badge event going on at Columbia Park, 4:30 to 7:30, organized by Independent Party. Just so you know here, I thought I'd ask these guys because people ask me, are they involved in this? And I said, not that I'm aware of.
And we really do appreciate the support that's out there for us right now. I know we say this every time we come on here, but this community is really second to none with the type of support that we've received, and we just want to make sure that we do our part, that we keep that support and keep your trust. So really it's great to see some of those things, and we're thankful for that.
Well, there have been some feathers in your cap here. I would think of that COPS program, not COPS, the one we think of, but Live PD. Yeah. I'm trying to think of the guy that was hosting that from Good Morning America. I can picture his face. I can't say his name right now. Yep. But anyway, they took that off after, I think it was George Floyd, but the program was Live PD, and they would go around and show events that are happening. They weren't really live. I don't know how you could do that with the Department of Justice. I mean, you can't. I guess if it's happening in the street, you can video it. Everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket, but to broadcast it, that's a different thing. When you start, there's different laws involved in that. But they were at somewhat of a delay. They still called it Live PD, but there was a bit of a delay in there. And the Marshfield PD was featured about a nonviolent resolution to what could have turned into something bad with guns drawn. Yeah. And so it was a bit of a feather in the cap for the department, and that's why I think people around here are proud to have you with the policies that you have, not overreact and wind up with a situation that so many of them have.
And one of the things I'll touch on that, and I think Travis alluded to this earlier, is the training. We put a lot of stock, we put a lot of budget into training. We've seen that translate into great work in the field, and our goal is to make sure we've got the best trained officers that we can.
All right, Deputy Police Chief Pat Zepps and Lieutenant Travis Esser here on today's edition of the Insight program, coming to you this second Friday in the month of September, as we invite Marshfield PD second Friday of the month to be a part of the program and talk to you and answer your questions live on the radio. Well, thank you, and stay safe out there, as they say.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, here on today's Insight program, I'm Jeff Cannon.